Morning, everyone. Welcome. It's good to have you guys here. Welcome to all our international and local attendees. My name is Danie, as you saw on the previous slide, and today's masterclass will cover low-level heights, pole climbing shoes, as well as a little bit about mobile elevated work platforms, or MUPs. First of all, I would like to say I hope you guys are staying safe. I hope wherever you are getting through this time okay. We are in South Africa still currently under lockdown. We are maintaining all the relevant regulations and social distancing and sanitizing and all those kind of things as well. So wherever you are, I hope you guys are staying safe and you're getting okay, getting through this okay. As I said, this is the masterclass for low-level heights. The idea is that we'll have a quick discussion for about probably an hour or so, and then we'll go over to a Q&A session afterwards. So yeah, welcome. I hope you guys learned something, even though this is a tricky time and a difficult time for many. Hopefully we can make the best out of it and learn something and interact a bit and get through this with something positive at the end. Just a little bit about me. I work for Gravity Training, based in South Africa. We have a few branches across Africa as well. We've been doing this for about 20 years now. We've been industry leaders in creating standards, assisting the Institute for Work at Height on various chambers, the road bikers forest, so forth. We are a sister company or member company of Gravity Group, along with Gravity Gear, who provides work at height equipment, rigging equipment, and so forth, as well as Gravity Access, who go out and install lifelines and do road bikers work, forest work, and so forth. So again, welcome. I hope you guys enjoy this, and I hope you guys learn something. As we go on, please do interact. Please feel free to ask questions. If I have a quick example here for you to look at. If you're on Microsoft Teams, you should be able to see on your right-hand side, there's a live event Q&A panel. Now on that side, you should see two tabs on the top. One says featured, one says my questions. If you go to my questions, you'll see at the bottom, it says ask a question, and just above that, your name optional. Okay, so please, when you do ask a question, enter your name there, so I know who I'm talking to and I can address you personally to answer your questions. When you ask a question there, they'll be passed through to our producer, Yandre, and he will moderate the questions, and then they'll be posted to the featured tab, where you can see all the questions that have been asked by all the attendees in this live session. Okay, so please, again, remember to put your name on, so that we can just know who we're talking to. Further from that's only for if you are if you want to contact us during this live session. But if there are any other concerns or questions you might have after this session, you're welcome to send an email to info@gravitygh.co.za, just for general queries or questions. You can also contact bookings at gravitygh.co.za. That is if you want to find anything out about our courses or book a course. They will then assist you with the relevant registration forms, price lists, available dates, and so forth. Of course, our training will only resume after the lockdown is lifted and when the government has permitted us to continue. You can also go to our website, gravitygroupholdings.com. That website includes Gravity Training, Gravity Access, as well as Gravity Gear's websites, where you can find out all our what we're about. You can see our history. You can see our course information, price lists, previous safety bulletins that we've posted there, as well as our online gear shop from Gravity Gear, and of course the services and products offered by Gravity Access as well. And then furthermore, you can also follow us on Facebook. Please do so. Like our page on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, and you can subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can follow us at Gravity Group. Now, if you are joining us for the first time, this is the fourth masterclass we are hosting. Johan Strauss did one on fall protection plan development. He then did a second one about rigging, and Heinrich Schroeder did one about rope access. So you can find the recordings for those sessions on our YouTube channel. You're welcome to go and check them out. And as before, we are giving away a prize this time as well. So we will be announcing the winner on Facebook as well. So if you are interested in joining the competition for a chance to win, please do like us on Facebook, and you can follow us there, and we will post the results of the winner on Facebook as well as Instagram. Right, so for this session, the prize on offer is a ladder use and a unit standard 22998 basic fall arrest course, sponsored by Gravity. The prize will go to the first person to answer the question correctly in the comments, as we said earlier. So as soon as you got the answer and you feel you're confident that you're right, please enter your name as discussed, and then you can stand a chance to win. So as we go into the presentation, as I said, the prize will be a ladder use course and a US 98 basic fall arrest course. And the question for this prize is, where in the OSH Act do we find the regulations regarding ladders? Okay, so I'll mention the answer somewhere during the presentation. It's not on one of the slides, it's not written down anywhere. So listen carefully and see if you can spot the answer, and then comment down below what you think the answer might be. Okay, good luck. Hope you guys enjoy. Again, please feel free to participate actively. We are live. I can see all the questions and comments coming in. So anytime you want me to stop or re-explain something, or if you feel I'm going too quickly, please do feel free to tell me so, and I'll be more than happy to re-explain something or to reiterate something you may have missed. Don't be too afraid. We will have a few tea breaks, coffee breaks in between the slides, so it's not 1 hour straight. We have to sit down and concentrate. The first section of the presentation is a bit more theory-based, a bit more lot of reading, a lot of slides, a lot of text. So we're going to have a short break in a few minutes, just to get everybody happy and comfortable and let the information sink in. Okay, so let's get going. So the first slide I want to talk to you about is the statistics regarding work at height. Okay, so if you have a look at the slide, currently is the numbers that have been reported by Federate Employers Mutual Assurance Company, or FEM for short. They recorded that 209 accidents of a total 1,291 were as a result of falling from heights, which included falling from agents such as ladders, platforms, skylights, as well as manholes and trenches, among others. Okay, so this is taken from an article that was published in the Cape Times October last year. And Gravity Training was, in that time, involved with a campaign called Safe Timber, alongside FEM and amongst others, where we went around the country promoting safety, especially in the construction industry, and especially for work at height. So what I want to draw your attention to, again, that 1,291, that's only the accidents taken from the Western Cape for that period. But it gives you a good general idea of what the statistics look like. So 209 accidents of a total of 1,291 gives you a total of 16.2% of accidents being fall from heights, which is an incredibly large number. So falling from heights is one of the leading causes of accidents and injuries in the occupational health and safety industry. In some sectors, it's only second to traffic accidents. So it should give you an idea that it's one of the most dangerous fields in occupational health and safety. So furthermore, just to give you an idea of what we're looking at and why this is important for us to focus on, is that research conducted by the Nelson Mandela University determined that an accident, the indirect costs associated with an accident can be 14.2 times the direct costs of an accident. And then they did a comparison between South Africa and the UK, where they determined that in South Africa, the accidents can make up about 5% of the total value of completed construction. So you can imagine on large construction sites, on large projects, that can make up an extremely high number of, that the company stands to lose financially. Okay, so the last thing I want to mention about the numbers, I just want to clarify that direct, indirect costs that we talk about, you might be familiar with the iceberg image or analogy, the idea that the largest part of an iceberg is the part that's underwater, the part that we can't see. So when some officials, risk assessors, corporate plan developers conduct a risk assessment, they are often charged with evaluating the severity of the risk based on the injuries or the likelihood of fatalities on site. Now, unfortunately, that's not the only direct costs that are involved, or the only influence and the only repercussion of an accident on site. So, of course, when doing a risk assessment, you want to consider the impact on the health and safety of individuals, but you should also always consider the financial impact that the company might face during such an accident or investigation. So the direct costs that we face as a company during for an accident is just purely the medical costs, whatever they may be, involved with the person who's been involved in the accident, the cast, the stitches, the hospitalization, whatever it may be, as well as the indemnity payments. Now that will be the payments that will go to your insurance company or any insurance payments that might follow according relevant to your company. But the things that people often forget that also influence the costs of such an accident, the time lost on site, if the site has to shut down for investigations or whatever it may be, the deadline delays, meaning that if you can't immediately go back to work after such an accident until the investigation is finished, your deadline might have to be extended, which then extends the timeline for the project, which costs you more, and so forth. Then if the employees involved in this accident can't continue their work immediately, you will have then to train new employees to continue that work, which will have their own financial implications, as well as extending the time and the deadline for your projects. There might be legal fees involved, depending on what the investigation flags up, and then there might be long-term remuneration involved as well if, say, the court finds that you should provide a certain financial support for the injured party for a set amount of years or whatever, and that can add up quite quickly. And as we saw in the previous slide, that can add up to about 14.2 times the financial amount than the direct cost of that. So it's a massive financial risk for a company to have accidents on site. Now, the main thing that I want to talk to you about, and the reason why I focus on these numbers and these statistics, is to bring it home to you in a very real way the influence that an accident can have on your site. Now, again, I don't want to take away the severity of a person getting injured or a person losing their life on site. That's obviously the first thing that we want to avoid and guard against. But what I want to bring home is the far-reaching consequences of such an accident. There are companies that have been forced to close doors following an accident due to these exorbitant financial implications of such an accident. So we are going to look at the risks involved in work at height, and especially then we're going to focus in on low-level heights for a very simple reason. As you saw on one of the previous slides, the 16.2% of accidents, they occur from falls from ladders, platforms, rooftops, manholes, trenches. All those things are considered low-level heights. Okay, so the guys falling are doing rope access hundreds of meters in the air. Those aren't the guys that form part of the majority of these accidents. You can go and look at the statistics. Worldwide, falling from ladders is probably the leading cause from falls from height in work at height. Okay, so I'm going to give you an overview of work at height, what we mean when we say work at height, and then we are going to look at how that affects and how low-level heights fit into that definition that we are going to look at. Okay, so if we go to the slide, you can see the definition we have for work at height. Now again, for our international viewers, these definitions are based on the South African Occupational Health and Safety Act. So if you are not in South Africa, please take this as best practice. Our South African legal documents, the OSH Act is quite well written, and you're welcome to take, as I say, best practice. If you don't want to take it as law, it's still a very good idea to take note on how we approach these types of situations. So I want to start off by giving you the definition of a fall risk as per the Construction Regulations 1. Okay, and that says there means any potential exposure to falling either from, off, or into. Okay, so from, off, or into. Now the into is an important one, as we'll discuss later as well. You saw one of the main areas where people fall from is the trenches or manholes. That's because people are often, they forget that if you're on ground level and you're standing next to a hole in the ground, excavations, manholes, trenches, whatever it may be, you're still technically in a fall risk position because you can fall into the hole or the trench or whatever. Just because you're on ground level does not mean you're not in a fall risk. Okay. And then Construction Regulations 10.2a, which forms part of Construction Regulations 10, which covers fall protection. Again, if you are not familiar with fall protection or fall protection plans, please do go to our YouTube site and you can check out Johan's masterclass where he discusses pitfalls that you have to want to avoid when developing a fall protection plan. So if you want to know more about that, you're welcome to go and check that out. So within a fall protection plan, we have to have a risk assessment for all work carried out from a fall risk position. Right. So the reason why I want to show you those two bullet points is the idea that a fall risk refers to any potential exposure to falling either from, off, or into. And if you conduct work in such an environment, you have to have a risk assessment for all those positions. Okay, for all work carried out in a fall risk position. So what happens a lot is people have a misconception about what a fall risk is, or they are under misconception about where they conduct their work. Again, a typical example would be work next to an excavation, manhole, or trench, or something like that, because the guy is standing on ground level. So according to the company or the HSE department, they're not at height, so it's not a fall risk. But again, if you look at the definition given for a fall risk, is fall into as well. So it's very important that when we talk about work at height, we all agree on a clear definition of what we mean when we say work at height. Okay. So for the rest of this presentation, I hope you take this forward as well, as we refer to fall risk and a fall risk position. When we refer to those two things, we refer to the construction regulation definition. So when we talk about these things, I want to quickly mention a few misconceptions, and I want to clear them out before we move on to the work at the low-level height stuff, as the misconceptions form a great part of that. So if you look at the slide, most people believe there's a minimum height required for when to use PPE or fall protection equipment, or there's a minimum height where if you stay under that height, you don't need a fall protection plan, you don't need a risk assessment, you can just go quickly and do your job. Okay, now I've heard everything from 2 meters to 1.5 meters to 1.8 meters. And I want to tell you now, according to the Occupational Health and Safety Act, there is no minimum height for when you need a fall protection plan. As you saw on the previous slide, the definition for construction regulations is exposure to a fall risk, and then you need a risk assessment if you do conduct work in a fall risk position. So if you can fall from or fall into something, you need a fall protection plan, and you need to have a risk assessment for that work you do. Then the other common misconception is that low-level heights are safer. I think that's just instinctively people are afraid of being at heights, and people will be scared of skydiving or bungee jumping, and they think hanging outside of a building 100 meters up must be scarier than working on a ladder next to your house, so therefore it must be more dangerous. Now, as we will discuss later on, low-level heights are quite the reverse. Low-level heights do make up the majority of accidents in the occupational health and safety sector and the work at height sector. So we'll have a look at why that is and why low-level heights do in fact cause more accidents than any other. And then the other one is that no training is required for low-level work. Now, I believe that this misconception has entered the industry just because of the type of equipment that we use. So for example, if you use a portable ladder, we all grew up with ladders being in the house and our dads using them to clean out the gutters, and then when you grew up and you start using them, or you have to change a light bulb, or you have to do something in the ceiling, you quickly grab a A-frame ladder and do what you have to do. Now, that might have given us a false sense of confidence that we know how ladders work and we can do work on portable ladders. But there are, when you get to occupational and industrial work at height, there is definitely training required for using portable ladders and any low-level heights. It is quite important that anybody going to site for industrial work is trained and competent for whatever equipment they use on that site. So we'll go through again a few things about the training required. Again, this isn't a ladder course or a low-level heights training. I won't give you all the info that you can get from attending the actual courses, which again you're welcome to do. I'll give you all the details again. The contact details I shared at the beginning, I'll give you those again if you if you want to book a ladder course or whatever it may be. But for now, we'll leave it at you definitely do require training for working at low-level heights. Okay, so I think that brings us up to about 25 minutes in. Again, this has been quite a mouthful and quite an intense intro, but I think we can break here for tea or coffee, and then I'll give you guys about 5 minutes. We'll be back at past, and then we'll have a closer look at the risks involved with work at height and low-level heights as well. So stick around. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask them, feel free to interact, and we'll be back shortly. Thank you. Welcome back, guys. Welcome back to the low-level heights masterclass presented by Gravity Training. I just want to remind you guys, of course, about the competition we're running. The prize up for grabs is a ladder use course as well as a unit standard double 2998 basic forest course. And to win this prize, please tell me where in the OSH Act you would find the regulations regarding ladders. Right. I haven't given the answer yet. It's coming up in the next section. It's not written down anywhere, but if you hear it, listen carefully and then give us your answers. Right, so we ended the previous section with the discussion about misconceptions and the need for training, that there is no minimum height for PPE, as well as the idea that low-level heights are safer. Okay. Now, I want to quickly run through a few of the risks associated with work at height. Now, these are general risks, and they will, of course, extend to low-level heights as well. But these are the risks that we've found are the most prominent and need the most attention from a company's point of view. So if you look at the slide, I listed 7 of these factors. Of course, there are many more. These are just the main ones that we've identified. The first one is the individual. Now, when I refer to the individual, I mean everything associated with the actual worker. That might be his medical fitness, his level of competency, his psychological condition, if he's afraid of heights, if he's under the influence of any alcohol or any substance abuse. The individual himself or herself will pose a risk to your site, or can pose a risk to your site, given the fact that they bring their own individual factors to that site, and many of which are beyond external control. The individual on site will have to make continuous decisions to adhere to the procedures and the risk assessments put in place by the company. So it's incredibly important to have a system in place to manage your individuals, to have a culture of safety within your company, that your employees understand the importance of safety, their own and that of others, and that they take the risks involved seriously. And I think in a time like this, with the COVID-19 thing, it's become abundantly clear how dependent we are on those around us to keep us safe, and how our actions affect those around us. So that is especially true on a work at height site, where one misstep can lead to a bunch of other individuals being in danger as well. Okay, then the other risk that has to be addressed is the company's health and safety management. Okay, the procedures they have in place, the risk assessment that they've conducted, the fall protection plans that they've compiled, those files and documents and procedures have to be developed by a competent person, and they have to address the risks, the work scope, the sites, everything adequately. A substandard risk assessment puts everyone from top management to the guy on the ground at risk for injury, and as well as legal actions, of course. Then the other one will be inadequate equipment or tools. Now, this might be equipment that has been used for too long, equipment that has become damaged, equipment that's not been certified, equipment that's not been purchased from a reputable dealer, equipment that has expired, that's been deemed unsafe by inspectors. It's extremely important that a procedure is in place for managing the equipment, and to ensure that the workers on site, the employees, are only allowed and only exposed to adequate, appropriate equipment on site. Then, of course, the next one, you can give a guy all the tools and equipment he needs, he has to use that equipment properly. So the improper use of equipment is quite a large risk as well, for 2 reasons. One, it can damage the equipment, which will render them unusable, and then, of course, that can lead to a person falling or getting injured or even dying if he uses the equipment improperly. Now that, of course, speaks to the training that the employees undergo, where they receive their training in terms of how to use the equipment, as well as the supervision on site. The importance of having a competent supervisor on site to ensure that the equipment is being used properly and the guys are following the correct procedures. Then the unreasonable deadlines. Of course, if you as a company expect too much of your employees and they are under pressure to perform and to reach outcomes which are unreasonable, they will end up taking shortcuts and ignoring some of the more fundamental health and safety procedures that are in place. The last two quickly, the access method that has been chosen to use on site. It's extremely important that access method is appropriate. First of all, it is safe, and that the people using that access method are trained on that access method. With that, I mean, if the guys are using portable ladders, make sure they're trained on portable ladders. If they're using scaffolding, make sure they're trained on how to use scaffolding. If they're using rope access, they have to be trained on rope access as well. And then environmental conditions, of course, the weather, wind, lightning, heat, cold, play a huge factor on our sites. And then, of course, that includes things like animals, bees, snakes, eagles, whatever it may be. So that's the only one of the lot there that can change quite rapidly. So the guys on site will have to be aware of this as well. And there's a few other environmental conditions that I would like to talk to you about when we get to the ladder use. Okay, so I quickly want to go to the next slide, where we at last arrive at low-level heights. Okay, so when we refer to low-level heights, the typical things we look at will be work conducted on things like rooftops, work from portable ladders, work from wooden poles, the ones you see carrying the power lines or the telecom lines, billboards, the advertising boards next to roads and highways, MUPs, the mobile elevated work platforms, and then again, manholes and trenches, as mentioned earlier. Now again, going through these, I won't discuss all of these in detail, as many of the principles do cross over from different sectors. So you can use the same principles that make a rooftop safe to make a manhole or trench safe. So I won't discuss each of these, but I will talk in general about the principles that we use for work at height and for low-level heights. So if we go to the next slide, I want to quickly discuss why low-level heights are especially dangerous. So the first thing is that you are working in a situation where we have reduced minimum free space. Now, if you've done your full arrest course, either the basic full arrest, the US 9-8 course, which is a part of the prize we're giving away today, or your 9-8-9-5 course, the full arrest and basic rescue course, you'll know what we talk about when we say minimum free space. For those of you who are joining us who might not have had that training yet, a quick summation of minimum free space is that is the space you require beneath you. So when you do fall, your full arrest system you have in place, or your full protection system you have in place, has enough space to protect you and to stop your fall safely. So a typical example of this would be if you are working on a ladder or scaffolding 2 meters above the ground and you are connected to a 2-meter lanyard, you will still hit the ground should you fall. So many people, when working on low-level heights, are under the illusion that they are safe because they are connected to a full arrest system, but they disregard the amount of space they need for that system to function properly. So that's one of the big reasons why low-level heights is quite dangerous. And of course, one of the other factors is that the rescue procedures can become quite complex when you work on, say, rooftops or inside a roof, those kind of things. Your rescues do become quite advanced, and that will lead to advanced training being required from the team, or advanced safe work procedures being developed. Okay, so before we go back to before we go on to the next slide, for the next section of this masterclass, I would like to discuss a few practical examples of low-level heights, and to give you a few ideas and a feel for what we look at when we do work at low-level heights. Now, this is aimed at the fall protection plan developer who might not have had a lot of experience with low-level heights, or just might need a refresher. But this is also aimed at the worker on site. If you do find yourself conducting a lot of work on low-level heights, rooftops, ladders, those kind of things, this is for you as well. Again, maybe as a refresher, or maybe to highlight the need for training. Okay. So if anything I mentioned in the next few slides seem unfamiliar to you, or you'd like to find out more about this, and you feel that you can benefit from a bit more knowledge, please do come for training, and we'll answer all your questions and get you safe and competent for the work you have to do. So the first slide I would like to discuss with you is the rooftops. Now, rooftops make up a large scope of work at height, not only for construction workers, but recently for the telecoms guys as well, installing antennas and things on the top of roofs. So it is something worth looking at and making sure we understand how it's done and how it should be done safely. So if I can get my pen working. So you see this worker here is connected to a vertical lifeline, in this case just a work restraint lifeline. So he has a rope grab connected to his chest, which is connected to a rope, which will limit his movement in this direction. Okay, and that's connected to a horizontal lifeline. In this case, it's a permanent horizontal lifeline. So this allows the worker to move left and right as well as up and down. So when he is on the sloped area of the roof and he should slip, he would be suspended on that lifeline there. Okay, so he can't fall off the edge here. But this obviously brings up a issue. If he was to walk to the right side of this lifeline, our right, his left, he will be entering this danger zone, this red zone here. And if he was to say be working on this corner here and fall off, he would swing back all the way and hit whatever would be on this side. And you can see that distance would cause quite a large pendulum effect. And force with which he would hit this area would be substantial. And that could lead to serious injury, even death. So for that reason, when we do have a system like this, and we do have an unprotected edge like this, it's extremely important that that area is a no-go zone, okay? Meaning that nobody is allowed to work there, even if you are connected to a system, okay? A system like this. Now, of course, if there is something that needs to be done on that side, if he does need to work on this area of the roof, then another system would have to be installed on that opposite wall, and then the lifeline would be facing this way, which protects him from falling over this edge. Again, that would lead to the exclusion zone being moved to this side to prevent him falling off the slope. Okay, so that is if the guy needs to conduct work near the unprotected edge or on the slope of the roof where he can slip and fall. So the other person on this side is this guy working here. Now for him, if he remains on the flat edge of the roof, okay, so assuming the roof is not fragile, assuming that he can't fall through that roof, it's a large concrete slab, it's secured, it's inspected, he has all his documents in place, there's no possibility of him falling through that roof. If these walls, these parapet walls, are high enough, above 1.5 meters, then we consider that area, that white area, as being a non-fall risk position. Okay, and I say that white area quite expressively because as soon as he enters this yellow area, he does enter a fall risk area where he can slip, lose his balance, and fall and enter the sloped roof area where he can then fall. Okay, so as long as he's maintaining a safe exclusion zone from the edges, he is in a non-fall risk position, which means he does not have to be connected to any fall risk equipment. Now, I say that it is allowed. Of course, it's always best practice to be connected to something at all times. You never know what happens, and it's always best to be connected. when you're at any form of height. Okay. But in this case, should you wish to enter this yellow exclusion zone and work on this sloped edge, you will then have to connect to a forest system as well. And again, he's also, of course, not allowed to enter this red zone where this unprotected edge is still a risk for him. Now, again, you can see he's crouched down. That is also a very important part of working on rooftops and low-level heights. If you do approach an edge, it's always best to maintain what they call a low center of gravity. So if you're standing up like this person here, his center of gravity will be quite high, which makes him more unstable and more prone to losing his balance and falling over. Where this person in a crouched position has brought his center of gravity quite low, which makes him more stable and much less likely to lose his balance and fall over the side of the roof. Okay, so it's quite important to remember those few things when you're on site, as well as when you're conducting a risk assessment for rooftop work, is to include those safe work procedures for the individuals working on rooftops. Okay, so speaking of rooftops, one of the leading reasons why rooftops are dangerous are the fragile surfaces. Okay, so if many of you might have seen them on the large storage warehouses you see next to the highway and so on, they have corrugated iron roofs with fiberglass sections to allow light to come through. Now, over time, these become dusty, and you can't see the difference between a corrugated iron sheet and a fiberglass sheet. So the guys walk on the roofs, and then they step on one of those fiberglass sheets, fall through, and some of them have become seriously injured. So before you do any work at height, any work on rooftops, it's extremely important that you obtain an access permit from the owner of that structure. And that permit should give you an indication whether the roof is safe or not, and what type of surface it is, and those kind of things, so you can risk assess accordingly. And then, of course, even with that access permit, before you start your work on a rooftop, just do a quick visual inspection to make sure you can't see obvious defects like large patches of rust or obvious holes or cracks, anything like that. And then you can do your risk assessment accordingly and then remain as safe as possible. Okay, and where there is any risks of falling through a roof, but you can't avoid working on that roof, then of course use all the relevant fall protection measures, lifelines, all those kind of things that you need. Right, and again, if you need to know more about these things, please do attend a course on low-level heights and fall risk and lifelines. Okay, so the next slide and the next bit we're going to look at is the portable ladders. Okay, so probably the one we'll spend the most time on, as it's one of the areas where the most accidents occur. Okay, so looking at the slide, we can see the standard preferred method of using a ladder. I'll share the slide in a second. So you see there the ladder is being secured on the bottom by one of the workers. He's holding it securely for his friend working on the ladder, and that guy is working with a 4-point contact facing the ladder with his hips between the rungs and between the stiles. Okay, extremely important. There are a few principles that have to be adhered to when using a ladder. Again, I won't go into a lot of detail with this. Again, we cover all these things in our training. So we have a issue where people are often afraid of putting a ladder up at too steep an angle and then being afraid of the ladder toppling backwards. What they then do is they put the ladder up at too shallow an angle, and that will cause the ladder to fall downwards. Okay, and that counterintuitively happens more often than that one. So we want to maintain a 4-to-1 ratio, meaning for every 4 meters the ladder goes up, we extend the feet by 1 meter. Okay, so that is, in a nutshell, the safe work procedures for a ladder. Always secure at the bottom. If if possible, and it's preferred that you use some form of rope and secure it around the pole you're working on, at the bottom as well at the top. Okay, so that'll prevent the top from toppling backwards and will prevent the feet from sliding outwards. Okay, now these risks are just based on using the actual ladder. Now these count for using it against a pole, a tree, a wall, whatever it may be. The 4-to-1 ratio, securing at the top and bottom, always important, as well as how to climb a ladder, how to ascend, descend a ladder, and so forth. Now, the things I want to talk to you about regarding ladders is the risks involved with the ladders. So, first of all, the type of ladder that you're using. Now, you can see this guy using an A-frame ladder. People use A-frame ladders incorrectly all the time with regards to the orientation of their work based on the ladder. All ladders are designed to have a positive direction of work where you face in the direction of the ladder, so the ladder is in its stable orientation. If you work perpendicular to this ladder or at 90 degrees to this ladder, you act on its weaker axis, which will cause the ladder to topple and you to fall. Okay. Now again, these two following bullet points, the type of overhead hazard and the length of ladder, sort of fall into one topic. Recently, with the installation of fiber lines and so forth on shared root poles or on poles that already carry electrical wires and overhead power lines, there's been an increase of accidents on site, of people being electrocuted on site when using ladders on site and on near power lines. Okay, so again, two things. When you are working near power lines, you're not allowed to use a ladder that is made of a conductive material at all. Okay, never mind how close you get to the wires. If you're near power lines at all, you have to use a non-conductive ladder. Now, made of fiberglass or composite material, no aluminium, always use a non-conductive ladder when working with power lines. Okay, and then of course your length of ladder should be such that you can't extend that ladder into the power lines, right? So again, the length of ladder with regards to the overhead hazard, make sure that your ladder is of the correct length, not too long, not too short. If your ladder is too long, you won't be able to maintain your 4-to-1 ratio, and you will be at risk of the ladder falling down due to the shallow angle. If your ladder is too short, you run the risk of the employee having to overextend himself and to stand at the top end of the ladder, which makes him unstable as well as the ladder. Okay, so always have the correct length of ladder for your work, and always pay attention to your overhead hazards. Okay, we'll come back to the power lines thing a little bit later, as they impact a few of these low-level height systems that we'll talk about. So next up, pole climbing shoes, something that not many people are familiar with. People working in the telecoms industry and in the power industry might be more familiar with them. These are shoes you strap to your feet that allow you to ascend a wooden pole quite comfortably. They are very nice to use. They are a bit cumbersome at first if you're not used to them. They do provide quick and effective movement up and down. Again, just to point out to you, the shoes have to be used in conjunction with a work positioning system as well as a fall arrest system. Right. Now, these things, as nice they are to use and as effective as they are quite, I would say, high risk if you're not used to them and you're not trained in using them properly, as well as they do pose some rescue complications if that guy were to become incapacitated. Then the rescue can become quite complicated. Again, for pole climbing shoes, the overhead hazards remain a massive risk. Okay, so when using these, please be aware of whatever risks are above you. Do not enter any exclusion zones. Do not put yourself at risk for electrocution or any other form of danger when using these things. So always be aware of your surroundings. Again, I'll give you more info about the power lines themselves in a second, but always be aware of your surroundings and include any overhead hazards in your risk assessment, okay, in your pre-task risk assessment on site. So moving swiftly along, we have MUPEs, the mobile elevated work platform. Now, these are a fantastic solution if you are in a position where ladders and pole climbing shoes are either too dangerous or you can't reach it with those two access methods. MUPEs are a fantastic solution. They offer easy mobility, far-reaching, quick and simple. Person in the bucket can remove it where they need to be by the guy on the ground. Now, again, the main thing when we talk about MUPEs is the people have to be trained, not only the guy operating the MUPE down here, but the guy who's in the bucket themselves has to be aware of what to do, where to anchor, what the procedures are for the person up there. Again, this involves a few emergency procedures that you have to be aware of, and it's incredibly important that everybody involved using these things are competent and trained. Right. Then next up, always do an inspection of the MUPE before work. Again, that must be done by a competent person trained in what to look for. And then, of course, the conditions. Okay, that refers to the ground conditions as well as the condition of the site that you're working on. Make sure that the site is safe, make sure the conditions are safe. So if you put out these outriggers, that they're on stable surfaces and so forth. And just quickly going back to ladders, I told you I'll give you a bit more info about the environmental conditions with regard to ladders. Please make sure that when you're using a ladder that you also consider the ground conditions, okay? And that'll factor into your type of ladder as well, the type of feet that your ladder has. If you're working on a hard, slippery surface, make sure your ladder has rubber, non-slip feet. If you're working on a soft, grassy surface, for example, make sure your ladders have spiked feet to bite into the surface. And also always make sure that if you are working on a non-level surface, you don't ever put your ladder up like this, where only one of the feet is contacting the ground, because that ladder will topple sideways. So always make sure that your ladder is on a flat and level surface. Okay, so here we arrive at the overhead hazards as promised. Now, just a quick note, the reason why this is included, due to the rise of fiber lines being pulled through shared routes and more work being conducted on sites where power lines are an issue, it's been abundantly clear that more training and more effort has to come into working near power lines. Okay, so these are the different types of power lines and overhead hazards, as we call them, you can expect to see. And what I would like to draw your attention to is that all these on the right, these power lines are well within the reach of a MUPE and the longer portable ladders. So it's quite possible, and in fact quite easy, to reach these power lines with these access methods. Now, depending on the voltage carried by these power lines, they will have exclusion zones given per their voltage. So some will have the lowest one, 400 watts and lower, will have like a 1 meter exclusion zone, or volt, sorry, not watts, 400 volts. We'll have a 1 meter exclusion zone where the highest, strongest lines will have up to 3 meters, and even more depending on the power passing through them. So whenever you do work on site, and it's not possible to do dead work, and if you want to know more about power line work and so forth, again, training. You can, of course, you must maintain these exclusion zones. Now, also, as you'll see, most of these structures on the right will fall under low-level height work. On the left, these two towers, you'll then move into the more traditional sense of forest or rope access work, and you can see that the risks involved with doing low-level work on these power lines are immense and can be quite dangerous. Okay. Now, when doing low-level heights, there are an almost infinite amount of solutions. Some of them are easy and straightforward, and some of them are much more complex. So the two images you can see on your screen now, on the left, that is a solution for working on a pitched roof which incorporates 2 lifelines, and it incorporates a rescue system as well. So if this person were to fall off the roof this way, you can lower this red rope and lower him off the roof this way. If he were to fall this way, you can lower him using that device, and you can lower him off that side. So all these systems, and there are many more of them that are possible to rig up. Of course, they take longer, you need more training, they are more complex, but the solutions do exist. Bullboards, as we mentioned, they do pose another risk due to the lack of anchor points and so forth. So you can rig a lifeline and so forth to ensure this guy is safe, as well as the barricading in place for the traffic management risk and so forth. So the reason I included this slide in this masterclass is to expose you to the more complex solutions, and that you don't have to stick with the ordinary user ladder or nothing. Okay, so again, if you are interested and you require any consultation on these complex solutions, and you find yourself often in a position, in a fall risk position, where you have to conduct work where you don't feel safe, where you don't feel comfortable, or you're doing a risk assessment or a site analysis where you struggle to find a solution that's effective and productive, please do give us a call, and we'll be more than happy to assist you with developing solutions if we don't have one for you already within our current set of courses. Okay, so again, if you see the ladder being used on that billboard there, if you go back to our slides on ladders, something I haven't mentioned yet is a few types of ladders that we can use. Now, again, the ladder type, extension, articulate, all those things will be covered within our ladder course, as well as the inspection requirements. Okay, now the inspection requirements we take from General Safety Regulations 13, okay, specifically 13A, which refers to ladders in the ARSH Act. So if you have any queries, or if you want to know more about portable ladders and how to use them, go to the ARSH Act, go to GSR 13A, and see what the regulations say. Further than that, portable ladder use training, extremely important. If you use pole climbing shoes, that gravity includes within our ladder use course. We do cover the pole climbing shoes as well. Gravity is in partnership with Easy Access. They provide MUBE rentals, MUBE training, and so forth. So Gravity is proud to be in partnership with Easy Access. So if you want to know more about them, please get in contact as well, and we'll make sure you get in contact with the correct people. We've been through the overhead hazards. Just as a side note, this solution you see here for the billboards and the banner flighting industry, this solution is included in Gravity Training's full arrest commercial course. That includes a full arrest and basic rescue course, as well as ladder use, as well as a short introduction to the low-level height systems you saw on the previous slide. Okay, so the courses Gravity present for low-level heights, ladder use, full arrest and basic rescue commercial, as well as all our full arrest courses, including the one that's up for grabs today. Again, the ladder use and the basic full arrest course do cover rooftop work as well, with the systems explained earlier in this slideshow. So if you're interested in that and you want to book a course, of course, you're welcome to send a mail to bookings@gravity.co.za. They will assist you with all the relevant information that you might need. Okay, and that brings us to the end of our masterclass. So I hope you guys have learned something. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Of course, it's not over. We are going to have a quick break again, just to stretch our legs, and then when we come back, I'll see what questions we have and what interaction we've had during this masterclass, and we'll open the discussion a bit more with your interactions, and we can have a good discussion about whatever concerns you might have regarding low-level heights or anything I've mentioned in this masterclass. If you want me to go over something again, I'll be more than happy to. So get those questions in, and I'll see you guys shortly. Thank you very much. Right, guys, welcome back for the question and answer session. I see it's about 10 past now. This masterclass is scheduled to finish at 12:30. So do excuse me if I go a bit over. I'm going to quickly answer the questions. I see we've had 9 questions, which I'll try and go through before 12:30. But if we go over a bit, I apologize. But I think it's important to cover these questions. We've had a few very good ones. So first up, from Anonymous, he asks, what is permanent supervision? Okay, and is permanent supervision necessary? In my opinion, yes. A competent supervisor has to be on site at all times, supervising directly all work on site. Okay, especially for sites where the guys are prone to take shortcuts or to ignore certain exclusion zones or ignore certain procedures that are in place. It's extremely important that the site supervisor be there to enforce the fall protection plan and the risk assessment and the safe work procedures. So in short, supervision on site all the time. Okay, and it's extremely important that your supervisor is competent. Okay, as per the site and task requirements. So he has to be the highest qualified guy on site. Okay, so I hope that answers your question. Next up, is a wooden ladder acceptable and suitable to use around power lines? Now, this is a tricky question in regards that the OSH Act does make specific mention to wooden ladders. However, in industrial work at height, we do not allow the use of wooden ladders. Okay. They are difficult to inspect to determine whether they are safe to use and strong enough for the imposed loads that we want to put on them. They are also prone to becoming very weak over time. The wood can rot, the wood can get water damage, and so forth. So they are unreliable and they are not as strong as they need to be considered safe to use for industrial work at height. Okay, so if you do use ladders close to power lines, again, non-conductive composite ladders are the way to go. Okay, that was from Michael Benjamin. Next up, we have Zander, or Zander. I apologize if you're not Afrikaans. He asks, what are my thoughts on bricklaying trestles? It is still used on construction site and it's a hot topic when it comes to health and safety. Is it safe? Is there any safety precautions to focus on, just in general, as it's still working at heights that doesn't seem safe? Now, that's an extremely good question. There are a few areas in work at heights like this, for example, working on shipping containers or something like that, where the amount of physical restraint, equipment, things like become impractical. You can't have a guy standing on a 2-meter bricklaying trestle connected to 3 lifelines doing rope access. It just becomes impractical. The hard answer is that based on the site, based on the height of those trestles, based on the conditions around which those trestles are being used, it has to be risk assessed properly. Of course, the precautions that you can take is make sure the trestles are on stable ground, make sure they're wide enough that the guy doesn't stand on one small wooden plank trying to keep his balance while he's working. Make sure the guys are comfortable, make sure the guys are trained, make sure that the site is clean and neat and they don't work with bucket and wheelbarrows of cement while they are doing that job. Reduce the traffic around the site, that people don't bump into them, reduce the amount of people on a trestle. So there are behavioral mitigations and controls that you can put into place for sites like, or for areas like this. Unfortunately, as you say, it's a hard topic for health and safety, seeing as normal harnesses, rope access, things like that will become impractical. So my advice to you within your health and safety plan when regarding bricklaying trestles, low-level heights like that, most of the risks can be mitigated with behavioral protocols and procedures. Okay, so I hope that answers your question. Next up, we have Dylan. He asked, we use an A-frame ladder, which is a 3-stepper in the substation environment to access panels. Do teams require low-level heights for training for this? Again, if I assume you're referring to those small step ladders that the guys use to access shelves and stuff in shopping malls and grocery shops as well. Now, low-level heights training is a bit of a vague topic. Of course, you can do a portable ladder course and see that as low-level heights training. So to answer your question in short, the guys do need training. Okay, so they can either be conducted by yourself, the health and safety experts, or you can come to something like Gravity and we'll provide you training as well. The 3-step ladder, again, I'll refer you to your risk assessment. If you consider that to be a fall risk, then of course you have to address that within your risk assessment. And then if you control that risk and you mitigate that risk, you will then be able to determine whether you can control it with, again, behavioral mitigations, with experience, with supervision, with safe work procedures. And if those controls aren't sufficient, then yes, you do need low-level heights training. But again, the low-level heights training that I've discussed in this course, in this masterclass, the portable ladders and those kind of things, they extend beyond the small 3-step ladders. Okay, again, we can have the same question as standing on a chair in the office. Do you need to risk assess that? So it comes down to a lot of these things are controlled with behavioral mitigations and protocols. Having the person make sure that the ladder is on flat ground, stable, all the arms are engaged, that there are no bolts or rivets missing, that the thing isn't cracked, that he isn't overextending himself, that he isn't working to the side of it where he can topple over or he can slip off of it. Make sure the feet are secure and non-slip protected and stuff like that. So for the smaller, like the 3-step ladders, always ensure that your ladders will be conditioned, make sure the guys using them are trained. But for that, I won't say it's necessary to have, say, a 4-week course doing on it. That's something that you are allowed to train in-house to ensure that your guys follow your work procedures that your health and safety department has put forward. So next up we have, what about the rescue from a portable ladder? Now that's a very good question and a very difficult one to answer as well. So the question is that, let's say you have a ladder and you've secured it at the top and at the bottom, and the guy working on the ladder is using shock absorbers, he falls, he's not suspended on his shock absorbers. Then we get into a difficult discussion regarding how to rescue this person safely. Because for the rescuer to reach this guy now, he has to either use a second ladder to reach him, or he has to use the same ladder. Using the same ladder can be problematic in terms of where the other guy is positioned, or in terms of the weight limitations on that given ladder. So with the most basic answer is, it is an emergency situation. So we are allowed to push the limits of the weight limitation on a ladder in a case like that, but only in a case like that, where the only way to get that guy down is to rescue from the same ladder if you don't have a second one. And the alternative is to install a rig for rescue system, if possible, on your ladder. So that's something that we can have a look at. If you're interested, you can send an email to us, and I won't discuss it here, as I don't think it's applicable to everyone. But if you are interested in a rig for rescue system from a ladder, feel free to send us a mail, and we'll give you a breakdown on what can be done. It's not something that's always practical. It's a good solution, but it does have a few drawbacks as well. But rescues, you can use a ratchet rescue or 3-to-1 rescue from a ladder, no problem, as long as you anchor it on a rung that's not damaged, and as long as you stay within a reasonable amount of the weight limits on that ladder. Okay, then we have one from, sorry, that was from Sean. Sorry, Octavian. The next one is from Sean, and he asked me to repeat the section I did on the portable ladders. So I'm just going to quickly get my slideshow back. Sorry, mute. Okay. So just back on the slideshow. So when using mobile elevated work platforms, it is incredibly important that everybody on this equipment is trained and competent to use it. The guy up there, where's my pen? The person, sorry, the person in this bucket here has to be competent and trained to be there. The person operating the mute from below has to be trained and competent to do so. Working in a bucket here, there are anchor points where you are allowed to attach forward systems and anchor points where you are not. Things like that has to be discussed within training, and the guys have to be competent. Before using a mute, ensure that it is inspected by a competent person, that is safe for use and fit for purpose. And then the conditions in which this mute will be used. Make sure the ground conditions are safe, make sure the site is safe, your access to the work area is obstructed, there are no overhead hazards. As we discussed, the power lines are also a risk for the mute users, so make sure you have no overhead risks, the conditions are safe, the people are competent, and your mute has been inspected. Okay, and while we're here, I just want to reiterate our partnership with Easy Access. If you do require any mute training or rentals, feel free to contact us with that as well. Okay, next question. Sean, I hope that helped. Please let me know if there's something I can explain a bit more. Then we have Hardy. What is the measurements of yellow and red areas? Now, I assume Hardy is referring to my diagram of the rooftop that we talked about, and he's referring to this red, the red and yellow exclusion areas. Now, Hardy, unfortunately, I can't give you a straightforward answer saying it should always be this or that. It is very site dependent, depending on where you have to work, depending on the type of roof, and so forth. But if you do want a good rule of thumb to maintain, I would say that your red areas, the absolute no-go zones, where nobody's allowed to work. 2 meters, always a good distance to maintain. That allows for, if a guy does stumble into that area, if he trips on something, whatever, he has enough room to not fall over the edge and then move back into the safe area. For the yellow zones, where the guy has to maintain low center of gravity, will be attached to a lifeline. Again, 2 meters is always safe, but you can maybe reduce that to 1.5, something like that. Okay, a good rule of thumb is that a body length horizontally like that should be sufficient. So if the guy falls flat, he still does not go over the edge. So again, depending on your site and your own risk assessment and the type of work you're doing, but as a rule of thumb, we stick with 2 meters as a safe exclusion zone. Okay. Hardy, that was your question. Then Dylan again, he asked, on low-level heights when clients wants us to use harnesses, but you, like I mentioned, the harness will not open protect you in time. How do we negate this? Okay, great question. Again, that refers, or that'll be solved with the type of system that you use. Okay, so if you're working at low-level heights, you don't have to use 2-meter lanyards. You don't have to use extremely long restraint systems. Okay, there are various lengths of, say, shock absorbing lanyard from 75 centimeters to 2 meters. So using shorter shock absorbers, always a good idea. Using retractable lanyards, always a good idea. Using vertical lifelines, also a good idea. So if you do require, if your client does require you to use harnesses and fall protection equipment on site, make sure you have the correct system in place. Again, this will be covered or should be covered with your fall protection plan for your all work done in a full risk position. So ensure that either, as I say, retractable lanyards, vertical lifelines, shorter shock absorbers, and one of the best solutions you can have in terms of, I'm not sure what your sites look like, but if you're working inside a building, for example, in a warehouse or something, it's always great to have overhead permanent lifelines and a safe fall factor where you can connect up and move freely about and then problem solve. Okay, so I think we have one more, last one. What is the maximum length of a portable ladder we can use? Okay, again, not a straightforward answer, unfortunately. There are ladders that go up to 25 meters and above, and there are ladders that are, the 3-step ladders. The training that we provide for our ladder use allows ladders up to 14 meters. Okay, and that's our standard ladder use course. Above 14 meters, even though there are ladders that go that high and there are people who work on those type of ladders, personally, above 14 meters, portable ladders become a bit high risk. The amount of movement, the amount of bounce and the flex, the difficulty in controlling a ladder safely, the difficulty in securing ladders at the top and the bottom, if they are that tall, becomes quite challenging. So for my money, if you have to work 14 meters or above 14 meters, in some cases, then it might be time to consider something like a MUP or rope access if possible, depending on what your site looks like. So again, there isn't really a maximum length, but to my mind, 14 meters seems, and even at 14 meters, trust me, it's not a comfortable experience being on top of a 14-meter ladder. So from my mind, 14 meters you should start reassessing your access methods and thinking about how you can make your job safer, because it becomes a bit dodgy at that height. So I believe that is all the questions. I hope you guys have enjoyed this presentation. I hope you guys have learned something. I hope you guys can take something away from this. Again, just to reiterate, we did have a few answers for that competition, so thank you very much for your participation. Just as a final reminder, if you have any questions that I haven't covered in this presentation or masterclass, or questions about anything else, if you want to find out more about anything, please do contact us at info@gravitygh.co.za. If you want to book a training, if you want to book a course, of course, you can go to our website and see what other courses we do present, and you can send them out to bookings@gravitygh.co.za. Again, visit our website for training, access, and gear, and then follow us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. Again, this masterclass has been recorded and will be uploaded to our YouTube channel shortly, today, maybe tomorrow. And we will be announcing the winner of that competition today for the ladder use course and the basic fall risk course on Facebook later today, as well as on Instagram. So please give us a follow there and stay up to date with all we're publishing and producing. And then I hope you guys have a lovely day and a lovely weekend further. Please stay safe, look after yourself, look after each other, and thank you very much for being here. I've enjoyed it. I hope you have as well. And then we'll see you for the next one. Thank you very much, and goodbye.